So for today's project, I'm a little embarrassed to admit that I picked up these tables in an estate sale. They were in a dark room, opposite sides of the room, and when I got them home, I realized they're not matching. I guess I didn't even realize it. They're totally different woods on the outside. One has burl wood, one has 3 drawers, and it's a totally different wood. So I don't know. I just didn't look close enough. So I guess I could probably try to tone them to the same color, but the burl is going to take things a little differently. So I'm not really sure what I'm going to do yet, but I'm going to go ahead and get them cleaned up. I'll take all the hardware off and then I will decide. So we're going to make it pretty though. So let's go.
So here they are. You see I have the drawers on the one side and then these have the doors. They are identical in size, but overall I have a few little spots on it. You can see I have a little veneer issue there, but overall they're in really good shape. Obviously they just need a refinish, but I'm not missing like major veneer or anything to that effect. I have all of the hardware, which for a vintage piece is really good. I'm not sure what in the world happened there, but I'll get that cleaned up. But I'm just going to go ahead and start taking all the hardware off and give it a really good clean, and then we'll go from there. Anytime I'm working with doors, I do like to take the doors off. I know a lot of people leave the doors on. I just feel like I get a really clean finish when I go ahead and just take the doors off. Vintage hardware can be kind of tricky, but the more you work with it, the more you figure it out. You can also label your hardware when you take it off to make sure you get the hinges back in the right spots. But I just think it's really good because you'll see that when I'm going through and taking off all the hardware, there's a lot of dust that collects behind this hardware. And so I love taking it off. I've actually seen people paint over the brass hardware, believe it or not. I'm just like, really? So I just use my 5-in-1 tool. I try to get under it, and then I use my hammer just to get off the nail. But you can see all that dust that's hiding underneath there. So it's really important to take all that hardware off when you can. So on the doors, I'm going to go ahead and label my hardware. I'm going to put right or left, top or bottom. And then that way, hopefully through the cleaning process, that will stay there. And you can also use tape or whatever, but sometimes it just helps to make sure you keep those hinges in the right spot. I'm going to use a chemical stripper to strip this. This is Safe and All by Blue Bear. I picked it up at my local Ace Hardware. You can get it online, I think, but I've used it before and it works really good. And it doesn't have a real strong odor. And so I'm always trying new strippers. So I will continue to try different ones to see what I like. I did still wear my respirator because sometimes, even though they're not like super fumey, they still advise you to. So I like to wear gloves. I still wear my respirator, but as you can see, I put it on, let it wait, and then I am going to come back with my Carbide scraper. Now I'm barely putting any pressure down on my scraper because you have to be real careful. You don't want to gouge the wood. So I'm just using it to try to get off as much of that finish as I can. And then once I have most of that off, then I'm going to go back with some acetone and I'm just going to get the rest of it off as much as I can. I'm still going to have to sand it, but this is a really good combination to try to get as much of that finish off as possible. And it really saves me on my sanding time. What I really like about the acetone is it really helps me get into those spots that are hard to reach with any type of tools. You can see right there by the trim, that area is very difficult to get later on with sandpaper. So it's great to go in there with your acetone and really try to get that finish off as best you can. Now I'm at a point where I'm ready to go ahead and sand. You can still see there's a lot of finish left on here. I don't know. Sometimes people are able to get a lot off. I use a Carbide scraper and I still have a lot of finish left. I'll start it at 80 grit on any areas that have finish left on them. And that's going to take the longest, getting any of the finish off. And then after that, your other grits, I do 120, then I do 180. Those go a lot faster because I'm not trying to remove finish. I'm just refining my scratch pattern. Sometimes you just can't avoid hand sanding. See that little area there? It's very difficult to get to. So sometimes you can just go against the grain just lightly and just try to get some of that finish off. Not too deep because you don't want to make real big scratches or anything. I'm going very, very lightly. And then I'll come back and then I'll go with the grain and try to get the rest of that finish off in that little trim area. One of my favorite ways to get into small areas like this is just to wrap some sandpaper around my Bondo spreader. And it just helps me to get into those little areas. These contour pads work great for different profiles. So I have a variety of them and I just try to choose the one that will fit the profile best that I'm hand sanding. And then I wrap it around my sandpaper and it just helps me get into those little grooves. This is a 1-inch Carbide scraper and it's great for little areas like this. When I'm doing my finish sanding, a great technique is to just go ahead and go over your piece with a pencil, and then you're going to sand through a grit, and then that way you know when the pencil marks are gone, you know you're done and you're ready to switch on to your next grit.
Okay, the nightstands are stripped and sanded through the grits. And so now I have to decide, how do I want to finish them? So I polled my followers on Instagram and on YouTube. The choices are whitewash, tan wash, medium stain. Of course, after I put it out, I have other options. I could combine two of them and I could go with like a white or a tan wash and then warm it up with a glaze. So I may just try it. I've got some varying wood tones because I have the burl wood on the front of one of the nightstands. I mean, they're not matching. They are the same size, same brand, same collection. It's just that one has the drawers and one has the doors, and the doors are burl, so they're not matching in that way, but they are identical in size. So I want to treat them the same, make it a cohesive look, because they theoretically could be in the same room, and honestly, people wouldn't even notice, probably like I did, that they're not matching. So let's try it.
So I'm going to move on to paint wash. I'm going to make sure that they're all cleaned off, all the dust is off. I'm going to do a ratio of 1 part paint to 3 parts water. Now, typically I do 1 to 4. I know people do 1 to 1. You can do whatever you want. Depends on how opaque you want it, how see-through and how translucent you want it. So the more water you put in, you're going to be able to see the wood grain more. So I used 1 to 3. I don't know why, I just did. I don't know. Sometimes I just try different things. This is a fan brush by Zebra, and I love it because it holds a lot of paint. And so I just dip it in and I just tap it off on my cup there, and then I'm just going to go over the entire piece crease and make sure it's fully covered. And then I'll come back with a lint-free towel and I'm going to wipe off the excess paint. You want to make sure you kind of go with the grain and make sure that there's everything is really smooth, because if you leave any ridges, it'll dry like that. So I like to also flatten out at the end. I like to flatten out my paper towel, and I like to make sure that it's really smooth so that I don't have any creases. Because if I have any creases in my paper towel, it usually will show up in that paint wash. So you see how I'm kind of folding that flat? I want to make sure that I have a flat surface so that I don't have any creases in that paint wash. Paint washing is not a hard finish, but it is a technique that you have to kind of work on. I don't typically seal I know some people seal the surface before they paint wash. You could do like a shellac and seal it. I don't. I have a friend who pretty much all she does is paint washes. And so I reached out to her. She doesn't mist the piece with water because that will raise the grain. She doesn't put any kind of sealer on it. So she just simply puts the paint wash on. So I thought, this is what she does all the time. So I'm going to take her advice. And in case you want to look her up, it's Linda from 412 Flips. She's on Instagram. She does amazing paint washed furniture. So she's a pro. I take her advice.
The overwhelming votes were tan wash and a medium stain. So I actually didn't do either of those. I actually did none of them that I put my choices out. So let me explain what I did and why I did it. So this set has multiple wood species on the same piece. The casing is one species. The frame around it is a different one. The trim on the drawers is different. The burl is different. So no matter what kind of stain you put on it, it's gonna take a little bit differently. So what I decided to do is I need to kind of blend all those wood tones together. And so I decided to do a beige wash. And so I used a color I have called a new gray. It's not gray, it's actually a warm putty color. And I decided to dilute it. I did a 1-to-3 ratio of that. I put it on, and that kind of helped pull everything together, made it look cohesive. So now I have to decide, am I gonna warm it up or if I'm gonna leave it? And when I came out this morning, let me show you what they look like. So here's what they look like this morning. You can see this is just one coat of the beige wash. I don't know if you can see it really well. Sometimes it's hard to capture on camera, but they look really good. So now I'm a bit conflicted because I was set on going ahead and putting on a stain, but I really like them. I know the burl is a little muted, but it's beautiful. I mean, they're lovely, and there's a very modern finish. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and seal them. Get a nice seal in that paint wash. And then if I feel like it still needs to be warmed up a bit, I can always put a stain over a sealer. And so that at least gives me a base. My daughter actually reminded me of it. I've done it in the past. There's just so many options when you do refinishing. Different things you can layer, different things you can do. The options are sometimes overwhelming. So sometimes you just gotta experiment. And this is not a custom job, so I don't have to make it look like a certain way. I can make it look like how I want it to look. And so I'm just gonna kind of sometimes let the piece dictate itself. And so I feel this looks really good. So I'm gonna pause here, seal it, and then we'll see if I need to put an additional stain on top. Let's try it.
I'm going to use Minwax. This is their fast drying polyurethane. It is oil-based polyurethane. It's warm, ultra flat. It's a beautiful finish. I'm just using a little siphon gun. It's very easy to clean. There's very few components. So anytime I'm using a lot of oil-based products, I like to use this little gun because it's really easy to clean up. So you can see I'm just going up and down with it. It doesn't have a lot of variance in the pattern, so you kind of have to just go with what it has. It does kind of get clogged up sometimes, so it comes with this tiny little brush. And so you'll see on the top here that I have some problems and it just stops spraying. So I just go and get my little brush that it comes with and I just clear those nozzles and then I can continue going on. You won't see it on camera. I did go back and fix that area, but it sprays really easy, takes about 3 to 4 hours to dry, and then I'll just pause and see what I'm going to do after this. I usually soak my hardware in boiled water and vinegar, and that just helps loosen it up. And then when I actually go to polish it, I use some Barkeeper's Friend and a very light abrasive. This is a 4 steel wool, and it polishes up really quickly and very easily. I'm going to use some Mohawk Oz polish to work on the interior of that just to kind of refreshen the wood. I had a tiny spot on the side that the paint wash kind of globbed up, so I gave it a really light sanding. I tried to go with a high grit, had to go with a 220, but you can see it's very forgiving. I usually have a little bit of paint wash left over, and I just applied it, wiped it back, and then it was good as new. So it is fairly forgiving, the paint wash, and then I will just seal over it. I labeled all my hardware with a Sharpie. And so even though it was boiled in vinegar, it did not come off. So it made it really easy to just reattach that hardware after I had it all polished up. I'm going to do a scuff sand in between coats. Now I have attached all the hardware. I'm going to go ahead and seal the hardware on the last coat. And that's just going to kind of help the hardware not to tarnish as quickly. So let's go ahead and look back at the before. This was a nice little set. Obviously, just needed a little bit of help. I decided to go very different. And so strip the whole thing down. There's so many different woods on this piece. You know, I had the burl wood, I had the trim, I had the casing, I had the frame, 4 different types of wood on there. So it was really difficult to try to decide the finish because there's just so many choices. But, you know, after all that work, here is the finished product. What do you think? This one might be a little controversial. Some people might think it's just too bland, too washed out. But you know what? I liked it. And that's why I paused and I just went ahead and did it. And the other thing is if for some reason they don't sell, I can always take the hardware off, warm them up with either like a gel stain or a glaze, and then reseal them. But I like them. They're different, you know. Sometimes it's just fun to try something new. So enjoy these videos and I'll come back at the end. So what do you think? Are you a fan? You can tell me in the comments. Do you think I should have darkened them up? I don't know. I kind of like them. I'll let you know on the community tab if they sell. But thanks so much for watching.